Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Tuesday, October 15th, 2019. Quite a bit to talk about today, so let's get right to it. In the eastern Pacific, the real area of concern, it's red for a reason, and that is this area right here south of Guatemala, moving towards the Gulf of Tehuantepec region, southeastern Mexico. 90% chance of development over the next several days, today, tomorrow, whatever, and this will go on to become a tropical storm, it looks like, and impact Central America with more flooding rain. They've already had some down there, and it's all part of this Central American Gyre, or CAG, event that has set up down here, this large area of turning motion in the atmosphere, a very interesting phenomenon, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a moment via the precipitable water animation from the University of Wisconsin, a very interesting and unique tool that we can use to see such things. So this will also have a say-so in what happens for the Atlantic Basin and specifically the Gulf of Mexico, as a piece of this energy down here looks like it's going to try to wind up in the Bay of Campeche over time and maybe go on to develop on the Atlantic Basin side of things in the western Gulf of Mexico, where we have a 40% chance of development as the disturbance emerges from the Bay of Campeche into the Gulf and tries to get going maybe by Thursday and Friday. How strong it is, where it heads, all that kind of stuff. This is where we have to start watching this very closely. But for now, the overall message is there's a lot of moisture tangled up down in this region. Very heavy rainfall. There is mountainous terrain down there. You think about Honduras, Nicaragua, Belize, the southern parts of the Yucatan, Guatemala, El Salvador, southeastern Mexico, you name it, it's there, and they are getting some very heavy rainfall, and we can see that. Well, we'll go to the precipitable water in just a moment. First, don't even worry about this. A little bit of moisture will head towards the islands. I wouldn't worry about that too much. And then TD15 sitting out here might go on to develop into a tropical storm. We will see. The next name on the list is Nestor. Nestor. I wonder if you say that like Nestor or Nestor. Probably faster like that, right? Nestor. You wouldn't call somebody Nestor. But whatever. The next name on the list is Nestor. And unless this one takes it, 15, TD15, and then this one, if it gets named, would be Olga. I do know how do you pronounce that. O-L-G-A, Olga. So there you go. All right, so looking at the precipitable water, this is really, really helpful. You get to see a lot of different things here, and I'm going to use black to help outline what's what. Here's TD15 and the precipitable water, this orange color, deep moisture getting pulled into it. You can see the overall envelope of energy and the tropical wave there. There's another one right there. These waves of low pressure, really, really easy to see in this particular tool, and you can see that, you know, they look like waves rolling along, don't they? Then you've got this larger gyre of wind flow. You got the wind coming in from the west here, the wind coming in from the east and southeast here, north and northwest over here. So it's just a large counterclockwise area of energy already, and once in a while a piece of energy or vorticity will pinch off and become its own man, so to speak, right? It'll do its own thing, and we see that often in the Pacific, sometimes in the Atlantic. In 2017, Central American Gyre gave rise to Nate, which eventually came up here and made landfall in Mississippi. And then last year, a piece of that Central American Gyre took shape and became Michael, which came up here and made the historic landfall as a Cat 5. And so forth and so on. So this is an important feature in the tropics, usually in the first part of the season, and then again at the end of the season. And I don't have an answer today as to why that is. I will make that part of my upcoming feature for next year that I'm going to put out in May on Patreon. It's called Hurricane U, like Hurricane University, and I'm going to find somebody who can explain why we have these early and late in the season, and then we're going to have a neat way to display that. But that's for later. Stay tuned. Nevertheless, you can clearly see how this works. You get the moisture and the wind pulling in from this way, and then another fetch of it over here. And again, parts of it will kind of try to pinch off and coalesce, consolidate, and you get a tropical cyclone. And that's going to be the case, it looks like, over through here. It'll make landfall in southeastern Mexico, while the northern part of this energy and the southern part kind of combine probably up here somewhere to create something that looks like it's going to make its way to the north and east in the Gulf of Mexico towards the weekend, and we'll have to watch and see. Is it a rainmaker only? Does it have a wind impact with it? Surge? We'll see. I don't know the answers. We'll look at some of the guidance in just a moment. So that's what that's what we have with the precipitable water, the satellite, and they're both based on satellite-derived products. So this is just the infrared satellite showing you the colors of the cloud tops. Actually, it's not showing the colors. The colors are assigned by the programmer, in this case Levi Cowan at Tropical Tidbits. The colors represent temperatures, and the brighter the colors, the colder the temperatures are in the cloud tops, and that means that they reach higher up in the atmosphere. So very cold cloud tops down here in our developing tropical system. There's vorticity and some energy sitting over here, but not much in the way of convection. And that's what these cloud tops show us, convection or thunderstorm activity. There's also some convection associated with a little bit of a troughiness kind of deal, some kind of a surface trough, extending down, look, right over Puerto Rico now as we speak, and across the Virgin Islands. I'm going to show you something in just a minute that's really, really freaking cool. Today's eye candy. You'll see. It's amazing. And then the tropical wave with very limited convection over here. Why is that? Well, we have very strong upper-level winds scooting across the deep tropics now, not allowing anything that's coming in from the east that's running into that to develop. It gets decapitated. You push that convection away from any low-level convergence, the vorticity at the lower levels, and it doesn't get to develop. Our tropical depression off the coast of Africa here, also struggling a bit. We'll see. There's a little bit of a window left where this could become a tropical storm. All right, so looking at the vorticity signature, speaking of all that, yep, there's a little bit here, a little bit of energy here over the islands, as I was talking about there, alluded to a moment ago, and I'll show you the results of what that did in just a minute. And more concentrated vorticity down here. There's a piece here over the Yucatan, and this is the one that we got to watch. And as this makes landfall and dies out, this one starts to take over. Sorry about the colors. Let's use white. There we go. This takes over and, again, might become something. Terrible arrow there as it moves up into the Gulf. So we got a lot to watch, but nothing serious in terms of wind and pressure. No hurricanes, but a lot of energy out there, a lot of rainfall over areas, and I keep emphasizing that. We got to focus on the overall package, not just, is it a hurricane? And if not, I don't care. If you think like that, you might not want to stay tuned into my channel and my videos, because we think broader than that. I'm trying to educate you beyond just the sensational high wind, high surge, low pressure impact events. Dorian, big time, big ticket. Michael, yes. Cat 5s, right? But these other events, all this rainfall down here, is problematic. And if you don't believe me, well, somebody from Belize, Central America, elsewhere, can chime in on YouTube, tell me what's happening. Rainfall is a big deal, so please take it seriously. I do here. And then here is the vorticity signature, the footprint, if you will, the fingerprint. I guess it'd be the fingerprint, not necessarily the footprint, but whatever. Maybe it is the footprint, too. It leaves its mark. That's what it looks like as you peel back the cloud cover. And I think that's really cool. You take this and you say, wow, look at all that going on. You look underneath, and this is what the energy looks like below, the spin in the atmosphere. All right, so how does all this spin out, so to speak? Good segue into the models here. The GFS from 12Z today, this is 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. This is the 850 millibar. That's about how high you go in the atmosphere, 5,000 feet. And then you'd reach 850 millibars, all things being equal. If there's no storminess or extreme low pressure or high pressure. That's a standard way of looking at it. This is the analysis. This is the model. And you can see that they fairly closely resemble each other. Well, it's not perfectly matched, but there's your vorticity down in the Caribbean associated with that system that's going to develop. The energy over Central America, a little bit of energy here east of the islands, inconsequential, and it doesn't really pick up what was happening over the Virgin Islands. So real quick, before we get into the model, because I almost forgot, and that would have been embarrassing, we had this plume of moisture that streamed across the islands. I forgot to show you the eye candy. And it resulted in some pretty heavy rain. It looks like some heavy rain right now over Puerto Rico earlier today. And we have a nest cam permanently set up in the Virgin Islands from a couple of our patrons, our supporters. So not only did they contribute financially, but we sent them nest cams and they set them up. They're using their houses and their, where they live and their bandwidth and whatever, and we get these great shots. Usually it's beautiful and you can just put it on, and at night you hear the peepers and the whatever else is out there, and it's very relaxing. Sometimes they get a little shower and it sounds relaxing, and it's just kind of very zen, right? Once in a while, like when we had Dorian go through, you capture a hurricane on these cameras, and we did, which we'll show later down the road, and we're working on some stuff. But today, they had a really heavy rain shower that moved through. So this is the end of it. You can only save 1 hour real-time clips at a time on Nest, and I wanted to get all this done and published for you guys. So here's the end of this heavy rain shower, and they have these, we call them gullies or dry washes, arroyos, streams, creeks, whatever. Down in the islands, they call them guts. And there's one that goes on the backside of this hillside over here, and it spills out into the bay. All right, and so when you get very heavy rain, like what occurred, this is the end of the rain shower, look at what happens here. This is so neat, and I love the tools. We can scroll ahead, and I want you to keep your eyes on this area right through here. Totally freaking awesome what happens. They get this runoff and the silt and pollution, and it is kind of yucky. Look what happens. It rains real hard, and then bam, there's the heavy rain. Sorry, I forgot there was more. And then look what happens. Wait for it, as they say. Let's get rid of my telestration. That'll help. There we go. It starts to spill into the bay there. So there's the heavy rain. It ends. The water rushes into the gut, and then it spills out into the bay. Look at that. Isn't that cool? It's just like if you took a mug of coffee and you put your creamer into it, and it spills out, right? That's exactly what that reminds me of. So there you go. Heavy rain shower. I mean, it was really coming down, cut the visibilities down quite a lot, and then it filled up that little gully or gut, and it spills into the bay, spreads out, and festers for a while. I just thought that was cool. Timothy, thank you very much for hosting the camera. Amazing what we can do and show, all part of our little tiny universe here of crowdfunding and interested weather geeks around the world. Well, we're getting there. We don't have anything in Asia yet and other continents, but we're working on it. So there you go. Interesting down there. Just a tiny little shower. Just goes to show you, hey, heavy rain, that's what it can do. All right, so back to the models. This is the initial. If we go through the GFS here, I mainly want to focus on this area right through here. All right, so keep your eyes on that area, and we'll use the slider. Watch how the energy consolidates right there. Very easy to see. Bundles up, boom, tropical cyclone forms. But in the Bay of Campeche here, a little bit more energy. But this is, robbing it a little bit. It's kind of stealing the show. And the little bit of land mass between them is not enough separation to really separate them. There's only so much energy available. That's why you don't usually have two hurricanes or typhoons or whatever running right next to each other. One will absorb the other. That's a whole other process. But usually one dies out and then the other takes over. And I think that's what might happen here. That's 18 to 24 hours out. By 30 to 36 hours, this tropical cyclone makes landfall, but then the energy comes up here into the Bay of Campeche. the first system loses its identity enough that I think that it would be a brand new system in the Bay of Campeche, Gulf of Mexico. And if we go through time, there it is. It emerges right there, and it's fairly well organized in the model. I don't know what to make of this, though. This is what has me puzzled. And let's go back and use the slider here to kind of look at this animation. Is the GFS doing what the GFS is sometimes famous for, and that is bleeding off energy unrealistically? Sometimes it bundles it unrealistically. We call that convective feedback. And you see that when you get these lobes of vorticity that come off South America, and they spin up into these powerful hurricanes that never happen. Sometimes they do that. This model will do that. We call it convective feedback. The model not understanding the heat and the physics, and man, that's way above my pay grade trying to explain it. But we've seen that, where you get these false readings, so to speak, these phantom storms, but also sometimes it'll take energy and split it off just for like no apparent reason. And sometimes it's correct in that assessment or forecast or whatever you want to call it. Sometimes it's not. Nevertheless, this is what it does here. And you cannot have all of this energy in the same area competing with itself and have anything bundle. So this is 78 hours out. Let's back it up. We'll just call it 2 days out, 3 days out. Man, I just got to slow down. Got a lot of energy lately, so forgive me. This doesn't look realistic. You'd have one system here and another one here, and I don't buy that. It doesn't make sense to me. It stretches it out, 2 areas of vorticity competing with each other. I just don't see that happening. So what I wonder is, at day 3, will there be something down here that consolidates everything into one singular, more potent system that then heads up towards the Gulf Coast somewhere? That's a big question mark. I don't know. If we continue forward, we see what happens. The first piece gets up here to the central Gulf Coast, and the second piece lagging behind here, and it finally just presumably shears out and comes into southeast Louisiana. All this orange color in here still means energy, spin in the atmosphere, vorticity, whatever you want to call it, and that's heavy rain. And the same is true over here. So a good rain event coming, I think, is almost guaranteed. Beyond that, it's hard to say. I just think that's weird how it splits that off. It's not like there's that's a pretty good front coming in here, but you're not dropping this giant longitudinal trough where it just roars in and splits everything apart. And maybe it does. We'll see about that. The Euro, on the other hand, if we look at that, same domain of the atmosphere and the region, etc. This is the initial. There's 24. You see it a little bit weaker with the system down here. There's the energy over Mexico. This is 48 hours. A little bit of energy now starting to coalesce here in the southwestern Gulf. At 48, that's 48. At 72, a little bit more bundled here in the western Gulf. And then finally at 96 hours, that's impressive enough that this onshore flow in southeast Louisiana, would bring some storm surge, some tidal flooding. That's very vulnerable down there. Heavy rain on that right front quadrant. Probably an east-weighted system where most of the rough weather is confined to the east. It's probably going to have sort of a comma shape to it. But sometimes they don't, and they bundle, and you get a bona fide tropical cyclone out of this that's classic looking, like Nate and Michael. And I'm not, Mark said we could have another Michael. No, I'm just saying 96 hours out is still a long time, and the models are they're getting stronger each run, all right? And we can see that if we just back this down a little bit. This is the previous run. This is similar, but the run before that was like, meh, and the run before that, still, right? So you see how this is advancing over time. And then I go look at the GFS, and I go, yeah, I don't know. So bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, if you live along the Gulf Coast down here, you need to be monitoring this for several reasons. the least of which, of course, the heavy rainfall. And that's going to be very welcomed, I think, for most people, because we are looking at a lot of drought conditions down in this region, and heavy rain, as long as it doesn't stick around and it's not too much too quick, could be beneficial. All right, looking at the upper ocean heat content, this argues for plenty of energy. Definitely. Plenty of energy for something to tap into. That also will lead to a very high precipitable water event. In other words, heavy rain. So if something develops down here with a name, tropical storm and beyond, just if, right? You know, I don't think this has the makings of a hurricane, but you never know. I would be planning on heading down here in the next couple of days as sort of a last, hey, we started down there in July with Barry. Might as well end down there here with Nestor or Olga, whatever. Those are good Halloween names, I think. Hopefully I'm not offending anybody, but, you know, even Mark is a good Halloween name, whatever. Probably stuck my foot in the hornet's nest there, but interesting names, right? They're not the easiest to say, but one of them could be used. We shall see. So keep your eyes on this. I'll be focusing on it quite a bit. Also, lower 48 weather. Yep, I do cover other stuff, not just hurricanes. Part of it's just awareness, making folks aware of what's happening. We have a lot of people that watch these videos. Well, relatively speaking, in my world, it's a lot of people. And, of course, we have our patrons on Patreon that are, actively involved. We discuss this kind of stuff. It's not just hurricanes. And so look what's happening. The Gale Watch color here in the purplish or whatever that is. What do you call that? I don't know what that, lavender, I don't know. Light pink or light purple, then the darker purple. Go back to kindergarten, Mark, learn your colors. There's a storm, that's what this shows. There's a storm developing along the coast, and I brought up another version of the GFS here, another vantage point. This is a big one. You can see that there's some frontal energy down here along the deep south, dropping some heavy rain where it's desperately needed. If you go out through time, watch what happens. You get this mid-latitude cyclone over here. Surface low is going to develop, scoot up the coast. So by tomorrow and tomorrow night, a potent, nasty storm system trying to come together here. This is the upper level low and upper level energy dying away. Surface cyclogenesis takes over, as they call it. It bombs out. They're going to call this a bombogenesis. Fancy name for strong mid-latitude cyclone developing heavy rain. This is Wednesday night into Thursday. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it looks like the morning rush in New England could be nasty with a capital nasty. Seriously, that could be yuck. Boston, Bangor, you name it. Maybe, depending on the timing of this thing, that's around 2 a.m. Eastern. This is 8 a.m. Eastern. Yuck. That could just, depending on the timing and when people start getting moving between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m., that 6-hour window there, that could be rather nasty. Not much snow, if any. If it is, it'll be on the backside. You can see a little bit of blue starts to fill in here. But a very deep low-pressure area for October, that would rival a solid Category 1, maybe 2 hurricane if it was over the deep tropics. 974 pressure in there, right in the Gulf of Maine. It will have some wind with it. So there's going to be some trees down, power lines, power outages, power lines affected, so forth and so on. This moves on out, and then you start watching the Gulf for whatever the heck's going to try to develop down there. So we'll be watching that very closely. On Patreon, we're doing a lot of interesting things coming up. I want to promote this more and more. This is not just a place to sign up and support what I'm doing and enable me to go out in the field and do this for a living. Remember, this is what I do for a job. And more relying, that's the combination of relying and allowing. Relying on crowdfunding to do what we do. And I'm able to post stuff here in blog format. It's very, very similar to what we would see on WordPress. I love the interface here. It's fantastic. And, it's just, this is a dream come true. It's absolutely spectacular. And we get to do some unique original content just for our patrons. Trying to encourage you to sign up. You know, it goes beyond just hurricane season. Starting in December, the first official podcast called Stories from the Hurricane Highway, exclusively on Patreon. It'll never be available anywhere else. Never. You have to be a patron. It doesn't matter what level. Coming in December, every week, I look back at my career, the past 2 decades, with interesting insights, a really neat audio podcast. I think you're going to really like it. Our current patrons are excited about it, trying to get you jazzed about it. Sign up, become a part of this, and that's the podcast. Then in January, a brand new documentary series, like a television show. My wife's going to kill me. She's going to be like, my goodness, it took you forever to produce the documentary from last year. Now you want to do a TV show? Well, hey, I love a challenge. Called The Hurricane Highway. And it is a series. So it's not 1 2-hour doc. It's 45, 50 minutes, whatever. Each. 6, 7, 8 episodes, whatever it takes. That drops starting in January. Also exclusively on Patreon to start. Then a couple weeks after, I'll move it over to Amazon Prime Video. And I'm also looking at putting some more of my Tracking the Hurricanes titles on Amazon Prime Video. Some of them are pretty ancient. They go back more than a decade. And I got to convert them and get the closed captioning. And it just takes a while. It's a lot to do, folks. And I try to do this generally by myself. I've got some great help when we go out in the field. But I'm the only one that does most of this editing and other stuff. And I'm not complaining. It's a fun job being able to put your creative skills to work. And a lot of that now is funded by Patreon. So get on board, jump in on the crowdfunding bandwagon. It supports a lot of people out there that do a lot of amazing things, from film, music, podcasting, and weather. You know, Levi's on there, the Weather Geeks. I'm sorry, that's a TV show or a podcast now from the Weather Channel. Weather Nerds. And I promise I will get my brain and mouth to sync up better. I'm healthy. I got more energy than ever before. It's like, woo, I'm going a mile a second. The Weather Nerds, guys, weathernerds.org. And you know what? I need to just look and see how many people in the weather business, so to speak, storm chasers, you know, models like Levi, the Weather Nerds guys, and others, how many of us are on Patreon? That'd be neat to know. I might look that up. Maybe you could look it up too and think about supporting them as well. All right, that is it from me. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Hey, Timothy and Brent for letting me know what was happening down there with that camera in St. Thomas. Appreciate it, guys. Really cool. Glad I was able to show that in today's update. A couple of our patrons. See, that's what happens. Have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon. As always, I appreciate you being on your side of the screen, listening and watching and hopefully learning. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.